Manjuka, could you start off by telling us a little bit about what Sri Lanka's position is right now, given that the country has officially defaulted and that we did default on our debt a few months ago now? Um,
So let's let people understand what a sovereign debt default is. We have declared to the world that we are insolvent, that we don't have money to pay our debts as they come due, and so basically we are run out of money, and now we need to. So only way you tell the creditors or your creditors that you need to give us some relief in order so that we can meet your debts in the future, and that's where we are. So at the moment, we have, as a country, we have announced to the world that we have no money. Simple as that. And we can't pay the debt. So what has now happened is that if you see to everybody implications, is that that's why you see that people can't access credit markets for banks to raise money. Banks cannot go to the market and get their trade lines, credit lines rolled over, because there is a risk that we have also insolvent, means we have also told that we don't have sufficient reserves to pay our debt. So it means that, in case banks don't have money, they can't go to the central bank, and ask for money to foreign currency to meet their liabilities. That's why when we say we're insolvent, you can't get trade credit, and they can't roll over. And banks have now to have cash to pay for whatever imports we have, and that is sort of a sum and a way it will affect everybody, and in sort of impact.
So even though it's spoken of as a sovereign default, the impact of this default is really felt not only by the Treasury and the central bank and the public banks, but also by the private sector.
It affects everybody. I mean, it's like, unfortunately, unlike a company where it's sort of one part of the economy, this is the entire society as large is affected, and that's unfortunate thing about sovereign defaults. That's why countries try to avoid it in a way, because it is also how it works is that's the way the financial markets react to it, to ensure that once you declare that you can't pay, they cut you out for the financial system in a way to force you to enter into negotiations to start a program to repay, and that is where how they make the debtor country actually sort of force them to think about restructuring, or rather engaging the creditors also in a kind of so that it makes if they are forced, and it will only alternative they have to do. So otherwise, you see, because unlike a company, it may not have assets. It is a legal entity by itself in a country. It is that sovereign can set its own laws. So it is so when so how the financial system would work is to cut a country out of it, so that it has incentive to sort of getting to engage the creditors to repay. So good old days, they had when defaulted people sent gunboats, but now it is more the financial system that causes the country to sort of start a plan to repay.
Right.
And it does make also, in reality, it makes sense, because it actually, in fact, also because what happens is you run out of reserves, so the banks cannot get money to pay for imports in case they don't have it, and that's how it works.
So although the Sri Lankan government decided to announce the default and sort of enter the default preemptively, given the state of our debt, was this inevitable?
Well, the question is whether whether we were preventive or we were forced to. I mean, Sri Lanka defaulted on what we know was almost run out of reserves.
Yeah.
So the argument they say is preemptively. I don't think it's a proper nomenclature to describe it, because preemptive debt would be in a situation where you think 6 months down the line I'll run out of money, but I have reserves of $5 billion. So I want to ensure that my people can eat and drink. Because I know when moment of default, I have no access to credit markets. I have my banks will be difficult to the country's banks will access trade credits. So you have your reserves. You'll be able to use your reserve to support your financial institutions to import. But that is not the situation where Sri Lanka was. You see, one good example of a preemptive default was in Uruguay, where the moment Argentina defaulted because the economy was interlinked, I believe it is in 2001, Uruguay defaulted, and it's one of the places where the impact on the society was not felt that much. Ecuador, to a certain extent, also did it during the COVID pandemic, because tourism went down, the oil prices went down, so they also defaulted, and then within 6 months they were able to restructure the debt and basically get back some credibility in the market.
Right. So now that the country has defaulted on the debt, the kind of it has almost become a buzzword now is, now we're going to have to enter into sovereign debt restructuring.
Yes.
And while this has been discussed and debated and sort of bandied around in every sort of conversation since the default, and honestly prior to the default as well, it is quite difficult to find a very clear understanding of what sovereign debt restructuring really is.
I mean, to tell what sovereign debt restructuring in a sort of simplified way is that we are finding a path to what you call debt sustainability.
Yeah.
Is that you would be able to create a situation where you can meet your debts as they come due. So what you now have your situation where you have your debts, you can't pay your debts. You said that, put up your arms and said that you cannot pay your debts.
Yeah.
Now with the sovereign debt restructuring would be ensuring that you are once again solvent. Basically, you're a path to solvency, what I'm looking for. That is what in somewhat debt restructuring is. So from insolvency, what's a path to solvency? That is debt restructuring.
Right. So could you shed a bit more light maybe on, you've kind of very succinctly put it as this path from in terms of like the solvency of the state, but when we speak about the process of debt restructuring,
so what happens in the debt restructuring process is that, you see, when you put your arms up now, you must understand that there are creditors, people you owe money to. In our case, that would be the bondholders.
Yeah.
People who have claims, so their money is acknowledged. You can't say that no, I owe you $1,000 and if he claims ₹1,000 and I say no, I can't, there's no space to say that I have ₹100 because I've acknowledged that, so I have to pay that. I have loans to bank. I might have loans to banks. Sri Lanka may have loans to banks, like to Chinese banks. Sri Lanka has borrowed on commercial terms. Then Sri Lanka has money owed to countries like Japan, India, China, China. Then also Sri Lanka owes money to multilateral institutions like ADB, which is a big creditor. And Sri Lanka owes money to IMF, World Bank. So when we have put our hands up and said that we have no money to pay our bondholders. So just to simplify what a bond is that acknowledged debt in a piece of paper. You say that you have given me 100 million. Over this one, I will pay over defined period certain amount of money, and at the end of it, I'll pay a bullet sum. Sum. It's not like unlike a bank loan, which is amortized, means as each installment you pay the interest and the credit. In a bond, it is you pay it at the end of a term, the entire thing, and it's also freely transferable. So just that people understand that the bond is. So that is so we have defaulted on our bonds. We have called what we call sovereign bonds. So Sri Lanka in foreign currency have bonds. Then Sri Lanka has defaulted on what we call bilateral loans taken per country, and they said that they won't be able to, after a cut-off date, they won't be able to pay those either the April 12th. So after April 12th, only new fresh financing they will finance. Other than that, the old financing they will not pay unless they intend to. They can give us some debt relief.
Right.
So that is basically what is the process, trying to attempt to obtain some debt relief, so that put it on become a solvency, but that is restructuring. So what would this mean is that you then, since you don't have the money to pay, you need somebody to give you some money, or somebody to tell you that you are able, give you some money, or put you give certificate that you're on a path to pay. So then we have approached the IMF, and in that process we have what they have done what we call a debt sustainability analysis. That's a DSA, which tells you if you meet certain targets, that means debt to GDP targets, you can become solvent again. So, which means that what you do is you would have to look at your expenditure and your revenue, and as you would increase your revenue by curtailing expenditure, and also in context in relation to the growth of economy, and come to a point where the IMF would say that if you follow this path, you will become solvent. So that's what first thing. When you use that, then you would next thing would be to hire some advisors who would advise you what you call it, what a debt debt restructuring indicative debt restructuring. But so what you need to do, they will look at and say, okay, you need to change your debt profile. You need to be able to reduce your debt by so many percentage in able to meet that. So then you would have to, then they will tell you'll have to go and speak to your creditors, either to get reduce your interest you pay for them, or you can get extension of the time period you pay for them, or you need to reduce the principal amount you paid for them. And those are the three things what you need to do. And then they may say that, look, you can't only deal with, you might have foreign creditors, you might have to have local creditors. You can't just do only bondholders, you'll have to do you might have to get relief from the multilaterals. So that is where what is the debt restructuring process is about. Right. So what debt restructuring processes happen is what you call NPV, on net present values. Right. So you bring down in order to get debt relief, you would always measure what you need to bring your present debt, bring it to what a net present value, and how much of on net present value you need to reduce to in order to meet the debt sustainability. Okay. So basically, that is where you start. So if some IMF tells you that you need to by 2020 you need to have your debt to GDP to 70%, 90% or something. Sri Lanka I believe is 130%. So then you need to get your present debt, net present value of your present debt is so much. If you want to meet your targets, you need to reduce your net present value of your current debt to and to so much. Right. So you need to proposition that to your creditors, and they accept it. So sometimes the creditors would say, right, we can give you that net present value, we will give you, but you need to share it among the burden among creditors. So we can't be the only person you take. So because they will try to get the minimum as possible net present value discounts for their debt, because they will try to say that every debtor has to take much, so that every debtor shares that burden. That's right. where they will try to do. So that is the sum of a debt restructuring process. Most countries would try to keep that burden away from their internal economy and to find foreign debt. Right. But sometimes, as you said, if you can't meet the debt sustainability targets, which is sort of considered to be where you can be part of solvency, you might have to take the pain to your internal economy and do what you call basically local debt restructuring. Now, sometimes what happens is that you make certain types of debt, like debts which central bank holds up for the government, not infinite debt. Right. Debt for longer periods of time. I mean, so that there's no maturity in the debt. You just pay the coupon, and there's the debt's in perpetuity, so that you don't keep it. And so there is various methods. If the local debt, they look at various options. Sri Lanka's unfortunately problem is that most of our bond debts also, comparatively 10 years. So it's a short-term debt and high-yield debt.
Yeah.
So we may have to, in order to meet the debt sustainable targets, probably the fair amount of what you call debt reduction, debt relief, may be needed. Even the Chinese banking debt, which is also considered commercial debt, would also have to be reduced in its burden.
Okay.
But there is also a school of thought that we may need local debt restructuring, which would require reducing payment of, if it's near term, maybe payment of the principal amount, or extending the maturities of those debts.